And just like that, a new star took center stage. Ji-woon Hak, a lifelong performer with a particular talent for throwing knives, was the newest addition to the killer roster in Dead by Daylight. By day, he was a musical sensation, but when the cameras are off, he had a fascination with sounds of pain and death going so far that he even implemented the screams of his victims into his music. His fascination and enthusiasm for killing became so insatiable that after lining up his producers from murderous concerts, the fog came for him, where he was no longer Ji-woon. He was simply the Trickster. Alongside his record label manager, Yoonjin Lee, the Trickster was brought into the fog as part of the All Kill chapter in 2021. He was the latest range killer, throwing his small throwing knives at impressive speeds before having to look for more knives in lockers. He was a killer with an obsession for showmanship and making a spectacle of his victims. He sees the fog not only as a master, but as an audience to impress, ending each trial with an impressive display of his mastery. But what's he actually like to play as? Let's go over his abilities. Trickster comes armed with a minimum of 44 blades to throw at survivors as he pleases. Every time he hits a survivor, the survivor's laceration meter goes up. Fill up the laceration meter, they get injured. Repeat the process, they get downed. Simple enough, right? But there's also the main event. Each blade hit fills the event meter. Once it's full, Trickster can go into rapid fire mode, throwing an infinite number of blades at a survivor for a limited time. After that, he goes back to whatever number of blades he had before, and the cycle continues. Trickster runs very similarly to the Huntress in their shared traits of limited projectiles and the ability to reload in lockers. However, Trickster is more like the automatic assault rifle version of Huntress, throwing one knife after the other automatically and requiring multiple hits to injure instead of slower, more powerful shots like Huntress. The knives have decent range as subject to gravity as you expect, having a little bit of drop, but not too much. It takes 8 successful shots with the throwing knives to fill up the meter for a single survivor and another shot to injure, so 9 shots. 9 times 2 is 18, so it would take about 18 blades to down a survivor from a healthy state, assuming you land every shot. Relatively simple power, right? Well... I'm guessing someone of behavior watched K-pop Demon Hunters way too many times because All Kill is back with a fresh coat of paint. The All Kill comeback chant puts Trickster in the limelight yet again with a rework to his power, some changes to Yoonjin's perks, an all-new survivor, and even a map based on Trickster's life and career before the fog. Trickster's new power was also given new features while still retaining the basic mechanics it's always relied on. We've also seen some more fleshed out personality from Trickster, greeting us in the menu with some fancy tricks with his signature bat and even some new voice lines. This is Trickster at his finest, ready for a show of a lifetime every time he appears on screen. We also got a brand new skin for Trickster with ties to his lore and the lore of the new survivor, Kwon Tae-young. Alright, let's take a look at this. Okay, you already selected. Oh my. The original mechanics are the same, but there's a little more to explore with the new rework. Trickster still throws knives, but then been given a slight buff, requiring 6 hits to fill up the laceration meter instead of the usual 8. And there's a brand new meter at the top of the screen. This is your style rank, which builds up as you hit survivors with knives, break walls and pallets, and perform basically any other interaction a killer can do. Each star rank, from E to A tier, increases the blade throwing rate and reload speed. Once you hit S rank, however, things change a little more. S rank unlocks the main event ability, which works in the same way as it did before the rework, but it does look a little different. A huge improvement if you ask me. While you can still enter the main event state and it's not automatic, there are also benefits to not using it. Survivor lacerations decay slower, and throwing and reload speed are even faster and your terror radius still increases. You can enter the main event state at any time, and it works the same way as before the rework. However, if you decide to back out of it, it'll demote you back down to E tier regardless of how many survivors you've hit, downed, or killed in that time. So Trickster has absolutely had a lot of work done to his ability. There's been some really good changes here. But is it actually an improvement? Honestly? Yeah. I love pre-rework Trickster, but he was kind of frustrating to play as sometimes. The main event ability originally felt very situational. You were throwing infinite numbers of knives at really high speed, sure, but there were some situations where straight up ignoring the ability was the move. In maps such as Hawkins or Larry's, you'd have to aim around corners and you'd need an iridescent add-on for that to happen. So you weren't getting that much value out of main event anyways. Sure, you could throw down corridors, but that was pretty much it. You also had the problem of getting main event after downing a survivor, so it always felt a little wasted unless you found a survivor before the timer expired, which, again, is a very situational thing. The rework fixed this. It makes you work harder for the main event, but it solves both of these problems. You no longer have to use main event in bad situations and now have an alternative reward for putting in the effort and doing different things to build up to S rank. Trickster also just feels more alive in this update with his new lines, laugh, and lore, and we get so much more of an enthusiastic and psychotic Trickster than we had before. In terms of downsides, I don't think there's that many, but my biggest gripe right now is, ironically, the knife throwing. I struggled a lot in this new update with how they've changed the knives a little bit. The throwing feels a lot smoother, but it also feels a lot more random. I found that I was able to predict the shots a lot better pre-update than post-update. Behavior actually did help with this in a way. There's an add-on you can run, relatively common add-on, where it puts a little crosshair on the screen. But I also found this to be a bit of a hindrance. I found that it created a psychological barrier between where I was meant to be throwing and where the crosshair was, because it's not an instant shot. You know, there's still time for the blade to get from A to B. So I would have my crosshair on a survivor, I'd throw it, and then it would miss because the survivors moved between the time of me throwing it and it hitting what it was gonna hit. So I found that it wasn't that useful. Overall, I'd say this was actually a really good update for Trickster. He's seen some really big improvements that I think weren't necessarily urgent, but are definitely welcome nonetheless. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and stick around. I would love to make more content like this. It's taken me way too long to edit this thing, and it would be nice to know that the work is paid off. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. See you around.